guys, welcome to the studio, and come on in. As always, make yourself comfortable. And in this particular video, I'd like to talk about some drum programming tips, and I want to kind of use as a basis. I get this magazine, these Sweet Notes from Sweetwater, and I do a lot of business with Sweetwater. I highly recommend Sweetwater. I've never really had any problems with them, and getting this magazine's kind of fun to read and look at. This particular one's got a $35,000 Moog analog modular synthesizer in there, that recreation that I don't think I'm going to buy, but at any rate, it's nice to look at. But they have columns in here, little tips and advice, and this particular one had a drum programming tip for non-drummers, writing your MIDI patterns for your drum programs like Addictive Drums or TuneTrack or whatever you might use. And though I agree with what a lot they have to say, after I read that, I've kind of went, I really don't do any of that, and that's really my preference. And so I kind of have a backbone in this video to say there really aren't any rules here, but they give you some guidelines in here, and I'd like to kind of go over them and discuss potentially how you might use the guidelines and then break the rules. And the first thing they're saying is just get yourself behind a real drum kit and play. And not that you really need to learn how to play a drum kit, but gives you a perspective on what's going on with the drums. Okay, so that's just kind of a basis. The next thing that they say keep it simple. And what they're saying is remember that human beings only have 2 hands and 2 feet. And drum grooves, most of the time, only utilize 3 of those limbs at one time. Okay, and then they go on to say that, you've got all these sounds that these drum programs can do, and so it's really easy to overdo them. And I find that I don't really care if I have a pattern that plays, say you got a kick and a snare and a hi-hat going, and all of a sudden you got a roll of toms going. Well, normally your snare would stop playing and potentially even your hi-hat and such too, unless you're just doing the hi-hat with your foot. But I really go for what sounds best, and I happen to like that. Sometimes I find that the drum track tends to drop out a little bit because all of a sudden you've stopped using the hi-hat and the snare to do your fill, and that's, of course, what a real drummer would do. But I think it elevates it to a little higher level to now you've added something on top of that. You've layered your rolls and fills on top of that. And so that's actually my preference in most of my cases. But of course, like I say, and I realize that this article is gearing the programming to really sound like an authentic drummer. So they're really trying to emulate, real drums and what a real drummer might do. And in my case, I find that really isn't what I like to do. I like to go with what sounds good. So I'm not trying to emulate reality or whatever. And then they say, next one, number 3, make sure that the sounds relate to one another. In other words, don't mix and match all your kits and have these weirdo drums that might just come out of nowhere. And again, I think that emulates some realism, because you're not going to find a drummer that might just have a totally mismatched tom-tom or something like that. But again, I would potentially disagree with that, in that can highlight something. If you've all of a sudden got a completely different sound coming in, that can be used to accentuate a part. Again, they go on to say, don't use a Roland 808 kick and snare, and that might not be the best choices if you're doing country or heavy metal or whatever. Well, probably not, and I'm not going to disagree with that. But quite frankly, you're not going to create anything new and come up with maybe something on your own or create your own style if you stick with these kind of rules. I'm being repetitive here, and I'm just saying know the rules to learn how to break the rules, and I think that's what's important. They say to go ahead and take a look at written drum patterns, and that'll give you a good idea what you can do if you're really starting to graph things out in a piano roll view, or I doubt you would probably use a staff view for notating drums, but it gives you an idea that you can see what stuff looks like, especially if you wanted to try to create specific patterns that you like, or if you're wanting to do some things that, some fills that you hear in your head, and you've seen what they've looked like notated, so therefore you can go ahead and relate and go ahead and just notate that out in your piano roll view. Another point they say is give your programming some feel. Now, I think if you're a novice programmer in this actually is a more of an elevated level of experience trying to do something like this, because I think if you and what they're saying is let me just read this. All drummers try very hard to play in time and practice with metronomes. They won't play exactly on the grid. So, don't quantize everything to be 100%. If they want to give the groove, a push or something in the pocket, the kick and snare should move slightly in front or behind the beat. And then they say they're not talking about rushing or dragging, but just slight drum variations. And I find that, and then they do say, don't just quantize the button at 100%. Give some random air to it. And yes, that's good, but I think if you don't know really and have a feel for pushing a beat or lagging a beat or kind of getting in a pocket or something like that, you're going to make your drum track sound sloppy. So be aware of what you're doing when you're getting to this point. I find that it is nice if you have a bass track or something like that, that if you can go ahead and, especially if your bass is a MIDI, or you can convert the audio to MIDI, and you can line up things like your kick to your bass tracks, that really helps to create a groove and really tighten things up. But I might caution you to make sure that you're not abusing that and just randomly going ahead and sliding all your beats just slightly ahead to kind of feel like you're rushing the beat or whatever, because I think you're going to start having timing errors here. As far as the quantizing, I find that personally, when I have something 100% quantized, I tend to like that. And this is just my personal opinion. I don't feel that a lot of my stuff sounds robotic, and I think that's the fear that what they're trying to say here is if you just 100% quantize, it's going to sound stiff and rigid. But I think there are some cases where you just want something really exact and right on the beat. If you're doing dance music or club music or house or whatever, that kind of stuff, you're going to want stuff just solid right on the beat. So I think he may want stuff quantized 100%. I tend to go ahead and make sure stuff is pretty close, and I really watch out for the sloppiness. And then the last thing they say is just don't program in full 4-bar patterns. Programming the same pattern for each section is good, but it's also a good idea to change the feel ever so slightly in each section. And this I do agree with. Go ahead and when you're doing choruses, if you are cut and pasting or something like that, I think that's fine. But I'm going to take what they're saying a step further, that don't make the second chorus just exactly like the first chorus. Maybe add a little bit to give you some dynamics, and so it can grow and breathe, and your song isn't just linear from start to finish. So first chorus might be a good extension. Excuse me, I got the phone going here. Okay. But at any rate, go ahead and let that song go ahead and build it. So the first chorus isn't just an exact replica of the second chorus and the third chorus. And especially maybe keep your choruses to where maybe your kick and snare beats are a little bit different than specifically in the verses. And that's more what I'm talking about. Hang on one second here, guys. Okay. And we'll be right back with you in just a moment. Okay, guys, sorry about the interruption there. I had a phone call I needed to take, and I didn't want to really do the whole video over again, whether it's boring or not. But let me see where I left off here. I think I was just on the last point here where they're talking about don't just program in 4-bar patterns. And I was trying to expand on that, saying that go ahead and think about creating slightly different patterns between the verse and the choruses, and then of course go ahead and maybe expand on that first chorus and make it slightly different on your second chorus, and then maybe even build on it even more in your third chorus. And then one last thing I wanted to say, if you're still sticking with me, as far as the sounding realistic and everything, and there's a lot of times that I like to use a couple of drum kits together. In other words, I would have 2 drum kits, and I would almost use the additional drum kit or the secondary drum kit more as a percussion track. And I like using some of the drums, the electronic drum sounds or the Roland 808 sounds and that sort of thing, rather than just shakers or maracas or hand claps or that sort of stuff. I'm not really into that much, but I like using the kind of drums that might give you more of a sound effects, and then turn those onto a rhythm track. And if you're listening in the background, you can kind of hear what I'm talking about. And so I like doing that, and I realize those 2 drum kits probably don't even relate to each other, but to me, I like what they're doing, and I think it's helping me to create a particular sound. When people hear my music and hear the drum tracks, my wife always says, "Oh, you got a lot of drums on there," but I like it, and so I really go with what I like. And of course, I take her opinion into consideration. But we all know, being the engineer, you're the final judge. But that's really what I wanted to say. You know, learn these rules. I think Sweetwater gave you some great rules to go by, especially if you're starting out. But learn those, and then learn, just like anything else, you know, theory or and that sort of thing with your music. Learn the rules, and then learn to bend the rules and learn to break the rules, and therefore you can kind of create out of the box and create your own stuff, and create stuff that hopefully will be just in your style. Well, that's it for this video, and I appreciate you sticking around and all the interruptions and everything, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks a lot, guys.